we're going to turn our attention to the County Championship now, where Yorkshire, Middlesex, Sussex and Nottinghamshire all won. Noticeable bowling performances came in those games from Bresnan, Plunkett, Dernbach, Meeker and Murtagh as well, all taking wickets. Very few standout performances with the bat, though, although Adil Rashid scored a second century in as many games. And Nasher, at the moment, I mean, I don't know whether David Hawkes has been dancing down the aisles of the office recently, whether he's even been in, actually. But, I mean, he must be pretty delighted with the way things are going for Yorkshire.
I'm sure he's delighted. I'm not sure he's so delighted that he's constantly being reminded of his predictions and things like that. But yeah, I mean, Yorkshire have turned around their season magnificently, and obviously they did it in this latest round with Joe Root and Bairstow absent on England. They got Bresnan back halfway through the game, and he played a key part in that final innings. It was quite humbling for the champions on home turf. I'm sure George will be able to speak more eloquently about Warwickshire's strength at Edgbaston than I am, but it really was a shock for them, and the hint in the quotes from Dougie Brown at the end were there were some harsh words spoken after that game. It's not been a convincing title defence by Warwickshire so far. Obviously, that's nothing new. Saw Lancashire struggle last year to defend the title, so much so that they went down a division. So I'm not saying that will happen to Warwickshire, but defending county championships is not easy, and that's a good thing. It shouldn't always. I quite like the fact that there isn't the same team winning it 3 or 4 years on the bounce. I think it's more interesting otherwise. But yeah, another very convincing performance by Yorkshire. Will be interesting to see how they maintain that through the rest of the season. They will be without Root and Bairstow, you think, for large chunks of it. Bresnan at times as well. But they seem to have some depth. Pattinson's come into the side and bowled well. Jack Brooks, who unfortunately broke his finger, is a good option. Liam Plunkett has found some form after a tricky start with his new county. And as you mentioned, Rashid is scoring runs and, by all accounts, bowling much more steadily as well. So they seem to have quite a few bases covered, and it's certainly adding an interesting dimension to the championship so far.
George, it was mentioned that we were going to get words from Mr. Warwickshire. I always call you Mr. Somerset in your defence, but Warwickshire have been struggling so far this season. And
sorry, JHB. Sorry, just before you go ahead, I'm just going to play some violin music before George starts to talk.
To be fair, I think I'd rather try and explain what's going wrong at Warwickshire than Taunton, because Somerset are really struggling. Maybe a bit less of a surprise, but I don't think anyone thought that they would be fighting off relegation, really, which I think it's going that way, isn't it, for Somerset? Surrey, too, have had a desperately disappointing start to the season. Look, personally, I think Surrey have been unlucky, really unfortunate. Whether you can keep saying that, I don't know, but I mean, it seems that everything that could go wrong has gone wrong at that club for about the last 12 months. I saw Chris Adams recently, and he looked very tired, very drawn, and as if he had the weight of the world on his shoulders. I hope they stick with him.
Was that because he bumped into you, George?
No, it's because he hadn't seen George in a while. He needs to recharge his batteries with a little bit of Dobell.
Oh, shush, you tart. Now, Warwickshire, look, I wasn't there. I wasn't at the game, as you know. They're not beaten at Warwickshire at Edgbaston very often. I suppose there's been quite a lot of disruption, hasn't there? But these are excuses. They've got a somewhat brittle top order. They've got a few people out, like Westwood and what have you. But, you know, I mean, if you're champions, you have to have the strength and depth to adapt to these things. And there will be questions asked. I'm not massively surprised to see the top order struggle once or twice. But what has saved them in the past is all those lower order runs. I still think... I mean, I predicted them before the season. I'm not going to change now. I still think they can win the championship. They'll get people like Barker back. I mean, he's a huge loss, you know. And that strength down the order and the fact that they should still have spinners, even if Jeetan Patel's called up for New Zealand briefly. They'll have spinners at a stage of the season where Middlesex perhaps won't, or not in the same depth. You know, they've had a bad couple of weeks. I think they'll be all right. But Nasher, very modestly, is not reminding us about his Sussex prediction. Now, when I say modestly, yesterday we were sitting next to each other in the press box, and he was going like this all the time, Sussex, fuck you. But he's been very modest now that the cameras are rolling, hasn't he? And he predicted Sussex in March, so credit where it's due.
They aren't quite storming to the top of the table yet, but it was a very efficient win for them against Derbyshire this week. You do have to fear for Derbyshire now. They struggled, as I think many of us predicted they would. Hoped they wouldn't, but predicted they would in the first division. But Sussex were very efficient. Pleased to see Michael Yardy get a big 100 there. He's had his problems over the years, and you always hope that players can emerge from those. And that was he played a leading role in that victory. So that was really pleasing for them. And Sussex, yeah, I'll still stand by it. I still think I still fancy them to win it at the end of the season.
Just out of interest, Derbyshire, I'm told, had a crisis meeting this morning where they got everyone in and had it unscheduled. What the hell do we do from here? They're in a bit of a mess, aren't they? They've played much worse than I thought they would, to be honest. I thought they'd put up more of a fight than this. And once you get on a roll, people don't like the word momentum, do they? They have what I would call negative momentum. Once the confidence in the dressing room is diminished, it's quite hard to turn it around already. I hope they can, because I think they've got some good cricketers, and I still believe that they could do a lot better than this.
Well, and also, if they look at the table, they shouldn't be too concerned, because I think they're only 6 points behind Surrey and Somerset at the moment. So it's not all doom and gloom. But let's just take a very brief look at that table. And yes, George's prediction for the title, Warwickshire, even Worcestershire, that would have been an amazing prediction. Warwickshire lie in 6th place in the table, and Nash's prediction, Sussex are in 4th at the moment, and Middlesex, my prediction, are top. So I don't like to gloat, and I don't know whether I let anyone know my prediction, but it's nice to just throw it in there.
I don't think anyone asked. I don't think anyone cares.
No, I think you're right. I don't think anyone does care. I can't remember what Jared said. He might have stayed out of the prediction.
I think he might have said Victoria.
He might well have done.
And I still think they're the top team.
Well, that's open for debate. Northampton have remained top of Division 2. They drew their match last week. The wins were for Essex and Worcestershire. And Worcestershire, the reason Worcestershire were on my mind just a few moments ago, Alan Richardson chipping in with a huge performance there, George, which you'll have been delighted to see.
Yeah, delighted and not at all surprised by. Do you know what? In the first innings, Nash and I at Lords, Nash and I had a bit of an argument about Alan Richardson. I would have dropped Stuart Broad after the second day of that test, to be completely honest. I'm not saying I would have.
Is that allowed?
No. But I mean, I'm not saying that I would have done actually when it got to the end. But I was so annoyed with his performance, where he was bowling like a pantomime Dane who had broken the heel in one of his shoes. It was just, it was awful. And I made the point to Nasher that Masters or Murtagh or Alan Richardson in particular would have bowled a lot better, and I still believe that, you know, a bowler like Alan Richardson would certainly not let England down. He has the tools to do a job in any circumstances. It's not going to happen. And Broad, with his extra height, his extra pace, well, he's not taller, but his extra pace and probably a little bit more skill,
and a more normal bowling action.
Well, does that matter? Because you know, did Murali have a normal bowling action? Did Malinga? I wouldn't worry about what's normal. I'd worry about.
I'm sorry. We can't put Richo or Chantry or these sort of guys in front of young kids. You don't want to encourage future generations to have ridiculous actions, George.
I haven't just said that Jack Chantry should play for England. I just want to clarify. Or even though I will now get a furious direct message on Twitter from him. Sorry.
He's not watching live, don't worry. That concludes our show, I'm afraid, with talk of peculiar bowling actions and the fact that we don't want children to watch them. I mean, surely to a degree, everyone has a part to play when they're educating their children, and that I don't know. I'm actually
not to show them Jack Chantry.
Not to show them Jack Chantry.
That is part of being a responsible parent.
Yeah. I still think Jack Chantry's father should be held accountable for his action. At what stage was he looking at the backyard and just saying, "What is that?"
Well, do you remember Adam Chantry's action? Because he was no quicker as a bowler. They're the two slowest left-arm bowlers in the history of left-arm bowlers.
Yeah, but also, George, when we met, when we were chatting to Jack, he was telling us that when he was about 12 years old, he was videoed and he saw his action. So, I mean, he has no excuses for not changing it.
It was also the first time he saw a horror film.
I think it was too late. Look, he does. The unique style of his action is actually a positive. It's very high, hits the seam, gets a bit of bounce, not very quick, but maybe there's a positive there. Look, he's having a career as a cricketer, isn't it? Good luck.
Exactly. Let's talk about the heavy roller.
Let's not this week. We've managed to avoid all talk of the heavy roller, so I'm just going to cut you off there.